Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you a game I just played myself in the German NRW Oberliga for my team Erkenschwick, and it's a very bizarre, unique game as something happens which I've never seen before in a game of chess. What it is you will see later on. In any case, I believe this game has it all, a lot of interesting moments, so I would like to take you through my thought process. And there are numerous mistakes, but still I believe that we can learn a lot from it, including myself. I really enjoyed playing it, analyzing it, and now I'm going to share it with you. The only thing you have to do is just become a subscriber. Follow this channel if you do like my videos, and if you're really a big fan, I'll really appreciate all the support, and you can even consider just making a small donation via my PayPal address below this video link. So consider that, please. And here we go. I'm playing with the white pieces against Klaus Schmitzer, who is a FIDE master from Germany. And well, I start the game with the move 1 e4, and my opponent plays the move c6. So the Caro-Kann, and I think this is something I had expected my opponent to play. So I decided to go for the move d4, d5, and here I go for e takes d5, trading of the pawns, and here I follow up with the move c4. And now we have the so-called panov variation. After the move knight f6, knight c3, black has various ways to continue developing, including knight c6 or e6, but my opponent is a big fan of the move g6, and I think he has played it numerous times before. And I go for the move c takes d5. So we do get a position in which I'm playing with an isolated queen's pawn, but I do have very nice piece development. So here I bring the bishop out to c4 to attack the knight on d5 one more time. My opponent goes back to b6 to attack the bishop, but I go back with the bishop to b3. The bishop is beautifully placed on this diagonal. And here, both sides continue with their development. Bishop g7, attacking the pawn with both the queen and the bishop. I play the move knight f3. Both sides are gonna castle. And here, black play the move knight c6, which is the main theoretical continuation. There are other possibilities as well. And by developing the knight to this square, black hits the pawn on d4 one more time. But I play the move d5. It's a principled move, attacking the knight on c6, but his idea is to go with the knight to a5 to put pressure against the bishop on b3. And well, it's very interesting, complex position. Numerous grandmaster games have been played here as well, and most guys, they are opting here for the move h3. Nice slow move, but very useful because you're preventing black from getting its bishop to g4 to put pressure on that knight on f3. Here my opponent started to think a bit, and again there are numerous options. I was still pretty much in my book, but he decided to go for the move bishop f5. I had still seen this move. It's a logical way of developing your bishop. There are not many other active squares, but I believe that the bishop also is not doing that much on f5. So I continue with the move rook e1. So here we see that even though I do have an isolated pawn on the d file, also black's pawn on e7, it's sort of a backward pawn. If it ever moves, I have the possibility to even take it with my pawn. So he goes for rook e8, defending the pawn on e7. And I played here the move knight e5. I think interesting move, active way of playing, as my rook supports the knight. Even there are indirect threats against the pawn on f7. I don't think I have any tactical idea here yet, but what is black gonna do in the next couple of moves? In any case, my opponent decided to take here on b3, which is maybe not the best way of playing. In a lot of lines you usually decide to postpone the capture of a knight for the bishop. After pawn takes back, it looks like ugly double pawns, but you do activate your rook along the a file. And well, my idea was that if my opponent plays something like queen d6, I can play here the move knight c4. And well, I think if black is gonna take, I take back with a pawn, and I have a very nice pawn center, space advantage. Maybe not too much, but I think white can definitely try to play for an edge here. So instead, my opponent didn't play queen d6. He went instead for the move a6, which is another slow move with the aim of being able to move the rook away to c8, for instance. But here I go for the move g4. Very aggressive move to push the bishop back. Bishop goes to d7, and here I can get my queen into the game, threatening to take the pawn on f7. And this is a very difficult moment for black, because how are you going to cope with the threat of the pawn on f7? There are various options. You don't really want to trade off the bishop for the knight, because then later I have very nice dark squares to work with my bishop. The rook can come to e1. Tremendous attacking play for white. So that is not an ideal way of meeting the threat. Rook f8 to defend the pawn, it's also not something you would like to do. So my opponent played a move f6, attacking the knight. It's a forcing move, but I'm going to take here on d7, and black no longer has the bishop pair. If you do take back with the queen, my idea was to get the rook to e6 to attack the knight on b6. Next will be bishop f4, rook a e1, with a fantastic position for white. Also the bishop on g7 is not looking great. So my opponent had a different idea. He decided to take with the knight from b6 on d7, and in certain cases the knight can come back to play, for instance, to e5 or maybe even c5, or sometimes even more passively knight f8 to guard the e6 square. In any case, I continue playing actively here with the move bishop f4. So two sets of minor pieces have been exchanged. How should we evaluate the position? I felt very good here. I believe that white is better with nice play along the e-file, but black is not without chances either. He goes for the move queen b6, attacking my pawn on b3. And how should I continue here? Well, I was thinking here for quite some time, and I was even considering just to sacrifice the pawn on b3 with a move like d6. This is a very thematical break to try to open up the center and to vacate the d5 square, sometimes for a knight, sometimes for the queen. For instance, if you do take on d6, my idea is to play the move knight d5 to attack the queen. And there are all sorts of attacking ideas in the center. My queen on f3 defends the pawn on b3 as well. So I wasn't really sure what to do. I considered d6 very seriously. However, I refrained from playing it on account of the move e6, because then the position remains closed. I do have a passed pawn, but I had really difficulties to evaluate this position properly. And I think the machine says that white is better, but during the game I felt it was pretty difficult to work out all these lines. So instead of playing the move d6, I decided to play it in a safer way with the move knight a4 to attack the queen. My queen protects the pawn on b3. Queen goes to b5, and here I play the move rook a c1. I like this square for the rook. I'm controlling the open file. Maybe at some point I can enter on c7, and know that black cannot offer the exchange of rooks. If he does so, then I will take, and the pawn on e7 can be taken here. And there's no counterplay with a move like rook to c1, as the bishop covers. So there's no chance here for the queen and rook to infiltrate. So that's why my opponent instead played here the move rook a d8. And once again, I was feeling great. I know that my knight on a4, it's a bit offside, but there are chances that the knight is able to come back into play. But how to continue? It's not easy at all. I played a little bit in a too relaxed manner, and I just played the move king g2. But in hindsight, I'm not a fan of this move. I think something like rook ed1 to support the pawn on d5 even better is a good idea. I don't think I can really put pressure against the pawn on e7. There are too many black pieces nearby to cover the threat, and the rook is pretty useful together with the queen. They're overprotecting the pawn on d5, and later I have still plans of trying to activate my rook, for instance. So in any case, you want to see what happened in the game. I went for king g2. I thought there cannot be anything wrong with this move, but then my opponent played this move knight e5, which I had seen, but to be honest, I didn't take it too seriously, because after bishop takes, pawn takes, I really felt that this structure looks awful with the bishop on g7. But there are some issues here. First of all, you see that the queen and rook, they are attacking the pawn on d5. And if I protect it by going back with a knight to c3, then my pawn on b3 is hanging. So that is not very attractive. And in the meantime, black also, apart from taking the pawn on d5, he also has ideas to go rook f8 and deflect my queen from the protection of the pawn on d5. So I played here the move rook c5, attacking the queen. And, well, apparently there's one move I had not seen at all. My opponent just played queen d7. That's the move I had expected. But Machine really likes here the move queen b4, attacking the rook. And I was thinking after rook e4, this queen is trapped. But to be honest, I totally forgot about this move queen d2. It's still the only available square for the queen. And, well, there's a bit of pressure against the pawn. There, the queen can always come back. Maybe rook f8 is an idea with pressure on this file. So black is not doing badly here at all. But my opponent played queen d7, which is also interesting. I wanted to go for the move knight b6, but the problem is that the queen simply goes to d6 and then both the knight and rook are hanging. So I was looking at other ideas, for instance, to play queen e3 to protect first the rook on c5 and prepare the move knight b6. But the problem is there's queen to d6. And here I cannot come with the knight to b6, it will just be taken. And if I come back with a knight to c3, preparing the knight coming into e4, there is this brilliant move bishop h6, when my queen is under threat and also the rook on c5 will be hanging. So that is not great at all. So in the end, I just went back with a knight to c3 immediately, overprotecting the pawn. Black goes for the move rook f8, attacking the queen. I go back with the queen to e2. I want to stay on light squares, keeping my king defended as well. But here the rook comes to f4. And here you see there are serious ideas of generating counterplay on the f-file or even to put a rook on d4. So I quickly went with my knight to e4. So the knight is guarding the pawn on f2. This is what I had been calculating far in advance. And, well, one interesting line is b6. If you hit the rook, my intention was to go back with the rook, and I'm not really losing the pawn on d5 because of rook ed1. This is my plan. The queen is hanging. You can't take on e4 because the rook on d8 will be hanging in the end. So if the queen goes back, it's rook takes d8, queen takes d8, queen takes a6. And here I'm actually threatening rook c8, winning the queen, so the rook probably got to go back to f8, but here it's clear that white is just much better, as my knight on e4 is so much stronger than the bishop on g7. But my opponent didn't play b6, he played here the move rook df8, and I understand there is pressure, but once again I was too relaxed. I felt like everything is under control, but I made a serious mistake here by playing the move queen d3. What is wrong with this move? I am defending the pawn on d5, so I was mainly caring about this move b6. If that happens, I can go back with the rook, but I should have used another piece to do so. If I move my rook to d1, then the queen is still guarding the king side. My king side is vulnerable. If my pawn had been on g3 or g2, I would have been completely winning. But here, there's always this kind of idea with something like h5, trying to open up the king side. But the key move here for white, which is something I had failed to spot in advance, it's the beautiful move king g3. So the pawn on g4 is very well protected and there's no way to break through. My queen, knight and king, they're holding the king side together, and with ideas like d6 coming very soon, I think I'm able to break open the center and activate my pieces. So here white is just clearly much better, but I played the move queen d3. My opponent played h5, which is a great move. If I do take the pawn, there is queen f5 with tremendous attacking play along the f-file. The knight is pinned. This is something I really didn't want to play. So how should I cope with the threat that black is about to take on g4? I play the move f3 and I felt everything is under control. But then all of a sudden, look at this. The followed rook takes f3. He is giving up two rooks for the queen. I take it. He takes. I take with the king. And there is this move b6. He is hitting my rook on c5. I go away with the rook to c6, so that there is still a bit of pressure against the pawns on the 6th rank. But frankly speaking, I completely lost track here, because he could have taken the pawn on d5 when there are some issues with my king safety. If I do take the pawn on b6, I felt that everything would be under control still. This all didn't happen in the game, but the machine says that black is close to be winning here if he finds this incredible move, king h7. This is so difficult to find. It's not that you're protecting the pawn on g6. The h-file remains closed, and your plan is to go for the move bishop h6, bishop f4, and then try to launch an attack with queen and bishop against the king. If that happens, black is doing great. If you think, okay, I need to keep that bishop out of play with a move like g5, then there is all of a sudden the move queen a5 with a double attack. And now we understand that the move king h7 is so strong, because had the king still been on g8, there would have been rook b8 check, moving one rook away, and then the other rook is also safe. So this is incredible. I mean, maybe I should have played differently, but black is having a tremendous initiative in this case. Let's see what happened instead. My opponent took on g4, I took back, now he takes on d5, I take with my rook on b6. I should mention I cannot take the pawn on g6 because of queen f7. With a double attack I'm losing my rook. So I take this pawn on b6, the game goes on, and well, I think it's still a very complicated position. Like, anything can still happen. Probably black is alright here still, but my opponent really tried to activate its bishop now with the move bishop f6. So his plan is either to go bishop h4 or maybe play bishop g5, and then if the bishop joins, it will be much harder for white to consolidate its king's position. But my opponent overlooked in time trouble the move g5, which is a great shot, attacking the bishop. He can't take the pawn because of rook takes g6 check, and the bishop will be gone. So he had to admit his mistake, went back with the bishop to g7. I still cannot take the pawn because of queen f7 with a double attack. So I went for the move king g2, trying to place my king on a safer square, and still I think it's a very complicated position. Anything can happen. Probably he should play something like a5, and there's some sort of mutual zugzwang in the middle game, like neither side is really able to make progress, but still very complicated position. But my opponent played king f7, so defending the pawn on g6, but I can take the pawn on a6, and here my opponent thought that he can take the pawn on b3. But look at this, there is rook f1 check, and the king is in trouble. If the king goes to e8, my idea was to give a check on a8, and after king d7, it is knight c5, I'm winning the queen on b3. And that is one problem. If the king goes back to g8, then we see another problem, as after rook a8, it's king h7, rook h1, and now you see why the h-file should not have been opened. It's very useful for me that the h-file is open for my rook, and here I'm breaking through. Black is forced to give up the bishop, and mate is gonna follow probably very soon. So my opponent played bishop f6. I can take that piece, but still, it is a tricky position, because look, my opponent goes for queen c2 check, attacking the king and the knight. If I go with my king to f3 to keep the knight protected, there is queen d3 and I'm losing one of my rooks. So that is not an option. I also don't want to give up my knight, so I have to go back with my knight to f2. And this is a very tricky position again, but I think that anyway, white is technically winning. But I want to show you one line. My opponent took on b2, but it's actually in a way much more logical to take the pawn on f6. It's what I expected, and I was thinking, are these pawns really strong? Are they able to come forward and threaten some counterattack against my king? Well, in that case, my idea was to follow up here with the move rook d1, with ideas to enter with my rook on d7 to give a check, or possibly even connect my rooks on the 6th rank to wrap up the pawns. Anyway, I think this is winning for me, but still tricky line, and I think black should have gone for it. But my opponent played here the move queen takes b2, and now I came up with a very nice idea, guys. This is very spectacular, because I saw this. I can take the pawn on e7, and my opponent played queen b7 with a double attack. It looks like he is winning my rook, but here I'm meeting this check with a counter check. I move the knight to e4. The check is over, my knight is there, and with my rook on f1, I'm hitting the king. This is something, I must have seen it before in one of my games, but it's something probably I've not played it too often, this sort of counter check. And when I get a chance to do, I really felt this is just beautiful. The line continues because my opponent takes on on e7. And here, well, my rook is hanging, my knight is pinned. So I had to go back. But how to evaluate this position? Have you ever seen this? 2 rooks and a knight versus a queen and 2 pawns. Well, during the game I was not 100% sure, because you know that whenever you're trying to convert advantages, it's usually a good thing to keep pawns on the board. I don't have pawns here anymore, but I'm able to win the game. I do think so, and I'm going to show you why. Because my opponent played here the move queen b6, even offered me a draw, but I was like, okay, I'm not going to risk here anything. The only thing I need to do is let my pieces work together. So I played rook f to a1. Rook protects rook, other rook protects the knight, and black can try to give a number of checks, but I can try to walk out of these checks. For instance, if he goes queen b3, which is what happened, king g4. Now, my opponent played queen e3, trying to get in to f4 at some point. But I want to show you this. If you, for instance, play queen e6 check, I can already just play king h4 and there are no more checks. But in the game, I was even thinking maybe I can go king g5. And if he gives a number of more checks, I can probably even hide with my king here behind its pawns. There are no checks. And later on, I will try to build up an attack with my 2 rooks and knight. Anyway, this didn't happen. But I'll just show you it because I really think my king is absolutely safe as long as my knight is nearby. My opponent played queen e3. I go rook e7. And where is the king going? I was really expecting my opponent to play king e6. This is not what he played. And my idea was to give a check here. And after, let's say, king d5, I wanted to go rook d6, sacrificing the knight. Because if he does take it, I have rook a4. This, I thought, was a very cool idea. Here he would be forced to give up the queen by coming to d4, but then the endgame is just lost. So the only other move here is king to c4, but I really felt that with my 2 rooks, I'm cutting off the king goes to b4, and even though during the game I didn't see a forced win, I was convinced that after a move like knight g3, I am absolutely safe with my king. There are maybe 1 or 2 checks, but these rooks are very good, and very soon I have a plan of building up this sort of ladder made on the A and B file. It's going to take some time, but frankly I don't think black is able to do much in the meantime. So my opponent, I'm not sure what he was thinking at this point. He decided to go back with the king to e8, and this is a tricky move, very tricky, but his king is cut off. But here I was almost very tempted to look for a forced win. But if you do play knight f6, well, I was hoping for this. Let's say you go king d8, rook d7, check, king c8, rook a8. This is beautiful ladder mate on the back rank. But the problem is after knight f6, you go king f8. And here I just didn't see what to do. So therefore I didn't want to play. I can give one more check. I saw, by the way, one other cool line. After knight h7, king g8, I looked at this idea, rook a8. And if you take this knight, I have rook 1 a7, king h6, rook h8 is checkmate. But the problem is, and that's the reason I didn't go for this sequence, is there is king g7. And if I do give a check now, there is king h6, and this knight is standing in the way. There are no more checks. My defense has been totally neglected, and here the queen is going to give numbers of checks, and it's going to be at least a draw for black. So that's why I think this check, knight f6, is not going to work out. I even looked at knight d6, but here again, after king d8, I didn't see a forced win. You can try to puzzle a bit yourself, but I don't think there's anything here you can do. So there's not a forced win, but you need to maintain control. And I think the next move is probably the move I enjoyed most playing during the game. It's technical move, rook 1 to a4. So step by step, gradually I'm improving my position. One rook is cutting off the king, the other rook, well, defends its colleague, but also defends the knight on e4. But do you think there is some sort of perpetual? No way, because after queen f4, I go with the king to h3. If you do give a check on f3, I block with my knight, and the knight is the best friend of your king, as all the checks have been covered. Look, the queen can't go anywhere. This is why a knight is such a good piece. And well, my plan is very simple: to move the rook away and try to get 2 rooks to the 7, and maybe one to the 7, the other one to the 8 rank. This is going to be checkmate very soon. My opponent instead played queen f1 check. But here I can simply go back with my king. And there again, there's not a check on f2. The knight covers the square. He goes queen e2. I play here the move, I play the move king g3. He goes queen e3. I go back to g2. He gives a check on e2 and I block with a knight. Here again, the knight is the best friend of the king. And, well, he moves the queen to d2, trying to set up new checks. But here, I want to get this rook from a4 somewhere to the back rank. Then it would be checkmate. But how to do that? Just play rook h7, threatening rook a8 with this ladder mate. For instance, if you do give check on g5, my idea was to go for the move king h2. And here, I like the coordination of my forces. Knight is guarding the king, while the rooks are also covering both the h and the h-file and the fourth rank, while mate will come on a8 next. So my opponent instead played queen d5 to guard the square. I played king h2, so my king is safe. And here black is completely busted. He cannot move the king. There's always the same follow-up, because he played queen f3, attacking the knight, but I'm not gonna do anything about it. Can you see here the killer blow, the final two moves of the game, which is something probably my opponent had missed in advance. But pause the video. If you cannot find it, give it a like. This video, share it among your friends, and let me know in the comments what you think of this game. And here, the final two moves of the game. It's rook a8 check, as it is almost mate, but the queen is guarding the a8 square. So queen can take here. But the point is there is a rook h8. So here I transform my advantage into from a mating attack into a material one. My opponent resigned here because after the king goes away, it is a rook takes a8 and I win the queen. Let me know, please, what do you think of this game? I'm not saying this is the best game I've ever played. In fact, there are numerous mistakes, especially in the middle game. I was not very happy with my play, with my performance, but the end, I think it was very special. 2 rooks and a knight without any pawns. I thought that was really cool to get in an actual game. So curious to hear your thoughts and looking forward to show more games of myself in the near future. So stay tuned. See you soon again. Bye bye.